Hello, and welcome to Just What the Doctor Ordered, the University of South Carolina School of Medicine Greenville's podcast, where we discuss news you can use from the upstate. I'm your host, Jen Manus. Today, I'm here with Dean Marjorie Jenkins and Dean Emeritus Jerry Youkey. We'll be discussing the 10th anniversary of the School of Medicine Greenville in our first video podcast, and we're excited to get into this milestone for our school and our community. Thank you both for joining me here today. Absolutely. To get us started, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and then what led you to the School of Medicine Greenville. Dr. Youkey, I'll start with you.
Well, thanks, Jen, and thanks to you and Marjorie for doing this and for having me here. Probably the best way to understand what got me here and what I did is a little bit of history. So I'm a military-trained vascular surgeon whose 35-year career really centered all the time around clinical academic medicine. And so that included time at Walter Reed, time in Massachusetts, time at the Geisinger Clinic in Pennsylvania. And then in 1998, I was recruited down to the Greenville Health System to expand their academics and architect a group practice. The Greenville Health System had been in existence for 100 years. Mm-hmm. And over that period of time had continually evolved its real academic clinical presence, starting with the first internship in the 1930s, up until we decided to start a medical school around 2009. It was a natural thing for me to become the dean of that because I had served as the associate dean for the presence of the University of South Carolina School of Medicine in Greenville with its branch regional campus for a decade. So we started a medical school, and that's how I came to be.
And the rest is history. And now for where we are, Dr. Jenkins, what brought you here?
Well, it was, the job was sent to me from various people, my husband included, who did not want to go back west. And we were at the FDA, we were in DC. I'm a chemical engineer by training. I'm also an internist and a personalized medicine expert and primary care. So when this job came to me from my husband and then our dean in Texas and the search firm called me, all within a week, I knew that, God was speaking to me and I needed to answer that. So I applied. Now, at the time, there were 27 dean openings, and I applied to one. So I read about Greenville. I read about the history of the school. Dr. Youkey had an amazing reputation nationally. The school was known as being so innovative. I received my master's in education from Johns Hopkins, and so medical education innovation is a passion of mine as well. And it seemed like the job description was really written for me. So I was very blessed to be selected to be the second dean and to follow such an amazing leader as Dr. Youkey.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start you out with the hardest question, which is, what is your proudest achievement so far at School of Medicine Greenville?
So my tenure here has been pretty interesting. 6 months after arriving, we had entered the pandemic. And so I think the way our school really stood up, our faculty, our staff, to get our students to and through medical school during the pandemic. We did not delay graduation at all. I'm so proud of that. But that was built on, the ability to do that was really built on the 8 years of Jerry's planning, being so innovative, so technologically advanced, that we were really able to flip to distance learning. And we are just a very student-focused, student-centered, community-centered medical school. And that really speaks to my heart as well. So that's what I'm so proud of, is that we really live into our mission.
Yeah, that's a lot to be proud of. For you, Dr. Youkey, during your tenure.
So it's pretty straightforward. We got the school open. And that was challenging, actually, in the environment in which it was open, because we're 90 miles from the parent university. We got not a free hand, but we really got to innovate a lot. Through that, we were able to open the school, stabilize the school. We recruited a good faculty, and from the get-go, outstanding medical students. And so that was what Marjorie's referring to as the base that was built, frankly, good job, that allowed her to survive and thrive during the pandemic. And so I think this is a mutual pride thing. The school's still here 10 years later.
Yeah, as it should be. That's a lot of change in 10 years. You mentioned the base. When we opened our doors, we had 48 students. Now 10 years later, we're over 400. Obviously, that's 10 years of growth and change. For both of you, what do you think makes our school unique? What sets it apart?
So for me, probably important to remember that this school is one of the what's called the new millennial schools. So there were no medical schools started in the United States between 1980 and 2002 because of an incorrect forecast made by the Geminet Committee of the government, predicting a glut of physicians in the United States by the year 2000. Obviously, as we all know now, that was erroneous. And so in 2002, Florida State University became the first new medical school, a millennial medical school. And we were one of that cohort of schools. There's now 157 schools in the United States. That group of millennial schools actually set a new path for curriculum and education. And many of those schools, and that continues, are schools that are based in or with a healthcare system, rather at the parent university. So you can think of, Mayo was the first actually in the 1960s to do that, but in modern times, Kaiser, now Atrium, HCA, all of those entities, not universities, but healthcare systems, have started medical schools with the focus on innovative curriculum, a focus on students, and an understanding that healthcare and medical education is going to continually change. Yeah. And so,
for you, Dr. Jenkins, I know Dr. Youkey mentioned our relationship with the healthcare system, and I want to come back to that in a minute, but I'd love for you, sitting where you are now, 3 years in, the things that you see make us unique.
Well, I love the partnership with the healthcare system. I think we, being so matrixed and integrated in one of the largest environments in the Southeast is a real privilege for us, but also Prisma Health does prioritize medical students in that they got us back as one of the earliest schools back in the environment during the pandemic. So that just showed their commitment to our students learning. You can't teach medicine totally remotely. I think that's really important. And also just the ability for our school to be known nationally as a leader in innovation. I love that Dr. Youkey, Jerry mentioned that report, that erroneous report, given that we're 800 primary care doctors short in South Carolina right now, which equates to about 3.6 million patient visits. That will be a challenge for people. So if I don't need a better mission for our medical school than to grow really amazing physicians, which we do. We accept the best and we help develop the best clinicians. Not only that, but they are so ready to engage in that really big healthcare system environment, that complex, teaming, high quality, low cost care that we teach our students, and all of that was envisioned by the founders, that we would be that type of a medical school. So we want to create physicians that will help change and move the needle for South Carolina and really for the nation.
And let me add to what Marjorie said, Jen, she's absolutely correct. All of that, and two other important things for the audience to realize is although we're short a large number of primary care physicians, state and national, and the actual numbers, we're short more specialists than we are primary care physicians. So the point is we need to think of the shortage of physicians being in the aggregate and not any one particular segment of it. And then the other thing I would add, which is sort of sobering, is that over the next decade in South Carolina, despite the number of new medical schools and students that have been added, we actually are going to continue to decline in the number of physicians in the state because of the large number of primary care and specialty physicians who are scheduled to retire in the next 10 years. And it's the reason, quite frankly, that the healthcare systems around the country, the ones that I mentioned, most recently Atrium, have decided to try and fill their own pipelines. And Geisinger started a medical school as well, where I was before. I hadn't had a medical school the whole time I was there, 11 years, and they now are the Geisinger School of Medicine. It's all about trying to keep your number of physicians up in your healthcare system.
Yeah, it's interesting to listen to both of you speak as a non-clinician. Spoiler alert for our listeners, I am not actually a doctor, just sitting here in between two incredible ones, but hearing the feedback of it's this combination of there weren't enough medical schools opening because of that erroneous report, and then physicians retiring, and you have a perfect storm of a gap of physicians coming. So even as a non-clinician, I can hear that and think getting them in a healthcare system, partnered with a healthcare system, is even more important. Now, I can see that kind of from the outside, but I'd love for you to, again, to kind of walk us through from a layman's perspective, the advantages, the partnership with Prisma Health, our largest private not-for-profit health organization in the state. What does that mean for our students, for our faculty, and for our future physicians?
Yeah, so for the healthcare system, as I said, it's pretty straightforward. It's a feeder program for one of their most critical commodities, and that's physicians. For the school and for the students, it gives the students immediate access to a large healthcare system with faculty that are really dedicated to that school to help them train in whatever clinical specialty that they want to train in. So it's a win-win for both sides. And I want to go back to something Marjorie said and emphasize it. So as you both know, I sit on the accrediting agency, Liaison Committee on Medical Education. And the data is becoming apparent that the students who were impacted by the pandemic, especially those who were delayed in returning to the clinical learning environment, have had a significant impact on themselves personally, as well as on their education. Now, they'll all turn out to be great doctors, no question about that. But the healthcare systems that worked with their schools to get their students back in the classroom and back in the clinic, in the offices, as quickly as was safe, are the ones that actually are ahead of the game.
Good for us.
We were out 2 months. I mean, some schools, unfortunately, were out much, much longer than that. So we really appreciate that. Our students also learned telemedicine during that time. That, you know, was a way to get access and with safety. So there were lots of partnership opportunities there with Prisma Health. I think the biggest one I see for us in the future is our research around population health, around social determinants of health. So what impacts a person's health that they live in daily, their environment, access, and that our students really go out and get engaged in this community. I mean, right, day one, they are learning to be emergency medical technicians, EMTs, and they've been doing that since, I think we were the first school to do that in the country. And so they get to learn the community. They get to learn that when they pick up a person that may be suffering from an opioid use disorder, what environment that person will be going back to. It builds a lot of empathy, our students have told us. Plus, they get to know their community, and they get to engage with other health providers in bringing those patients into the ER, et cetera. And that's all before they enter class.
Yeah, which is incredible, which to both of your points, that is not normal for a medical school. That is innovative. That is something we're proud of intentionally as we're working to fill our pipeline and staunch the gap for our physicians. I want to point out, on purpose, by design, we talk about filling our pipeline and training and retaining our students here to date. Of our graduating classes, we've been graduating classes since 2016, our inaugural graduation class. So far, 26% of our medical students have matched in the state of South Carolina. Something to be proud of, I know, for us, and I know something that we intend to keep working on.
So I would tell you it's something to be concerned about.
Okay.
The data is clear nationally that if you educate medical students, about 25% or so will stay in the state where they went to medical school. If you bring students from outside the state into your residency program, about a quarter of those will stay in your state. But if you educate medical students in your state and then retain them in your residency program, almost 50% of them will stay in your state. And since we began this, because of the shortage of physicians in South Carolina, we need more residency programs across the state, both in primary care and specialty care, in order to increase that retention rate from 26%, probably up to 50% or more.
To build on those numbers, because I'm a data person,
let's do it.
is that across the country, medical schools are opening, new medical schools, hundreds of students, but the residency slots and programs are not growing at the same rate. So up to 5% of students may not match in their senior year of medical school. So think about it, going through medical school, given the need of the country for physicians, and then you don't have a residency spot because there's discordance. There's too many medical school seats to residency programs.
Yeah.
And that cap happened back, was it the 90s, Jerry?
97, yeah.
Wow.
The Balanced Budget Act from 1997 is what capped the number of residents in the country, and it's not been increased except for small amounts since then. Wow. And it's a problem in this state, not only for numbers, but also for specialty programs, because we really, Marjorie will have to speak to what it's like now, but when I was looking at the students that left the state, many of them left for residency programs that we don't offer in South Carolina, and certainly not in the upstate.
And that sounds the importance of the ongoing partnership with the health system in terms of doing everything we can to increase those spots. Because as you said, opening a new medical school is wonderful. That's step one, though.
Georgia and Florida appreciate it very much.
So we mentioned earlier, because we were, created out of a sense of urgency, we also didn't just want to start another medical school, right? We wanted to be innovative, and technology has played a significant role in that, to the tune of School of Medicine Greenville being named an Apple Distinguished School in 2020. We talked a little bit, you heard us mention telemedicine, you heard us mention our students didn't drop a single day in med school in terms of the pandemic and the impact there, but tell us a little bit about the role technology plays in these new medical schools, and for us specifically.
So I'll tell you, technology is critically important, and my contribution to it was recruiting students and faculty and staff that knew how to do it. That was my total role.
Fair enough. Okay, so you were the recruiter for the experts in it. Dr. Jenkins, you coming in to that and seeing kind of our existing technology and our existing sweet spot, how have we grown and elevated even since our inception?
So technology is outdated in a few years. We've invested a lot in upgrading our classrooms. We're 10 years old. Our video meetings are now commonplace, so that's a good thing, but also it's good for our students. During the pandemic, they were able to attend virtually via WebEx, and that meant a lot to them to be real time, able to ask their professor questions. So we invested a lot in technology around that time. Not all schools have an anatomy lab. They use technology to do 3D anatomy. We have a gorgeous anatomy lab on the top floor of the building. But high definition screens are important. We have high definition screens in our histology space. What I say is we are a medical school that was built to develop a different kind of physician. Our students, as everyone hears about student debt, and yet all of the discussion around student debt right now excludes medical student forgiveness, even though our students will leave with almost $176,000 in debt. So given all of that, I ask, when we invest in resources, I go, what is the student's ROI? Because they're our investors. They are the people that we come in and we do our jobs for, and our community and our faculty. But it's really about that student focus, and Gen Y, millennials, Gen Zs will tell you what technology is not working for them. And they will also tell you what technology they would like to have. So they get their iPads fully loaded when they come in. They wanted pens for that. We had not provided those, but we said, yes, we're going to provide those to you.
Sure.
That also is about inequity. Students who can afford to buy additional and students who can't afford to buy additional technology. So I'm also very aware of equity around across our medical school.
Absolutely.
And you know, Jen, I think the other thing that the technology speaks to, it's sort of a surrogate for telling the students and the faculty, all of us frankly, that the key to providing good medical care in the future is to continue to access information and to learn. Without good technology, it's very difficult to access most current information. I used to try to emphasize that to the students by reminding them as they sat as incoming medical students that half of the information that they learned over the course of medical school would be out of date by the time they graduated.
Which is only 4 years.
Which is only 4 years, which speaks to the turnover of medical knowledge. And so the technology is the key to being able to access something that is current rather than something that's in a textbook that probably is pretty much out of date by the time it's published. And so I think the technology as a foundation in a modern medical school is critically important.
Yes. And it's that practical encouragement towards lifelong learning, which, as I have learned, is built into the field of medicine. You have to be willing to be a lifelong learner to execute it well, to treat your patients well. All of that speaks to, we talk a lot about School of Medicine Greenville, that we are transforming medicine. That's our goal, that's our mission for our patients. How do we do that on a daily basis, Dr. Jenkins?
I think it's the way we show up. Our students show up in the clinical learning environment in their 3rd year. We're told they behave more like 4th year students. They're very well prepared, they're very strong. We wanted to increase the percentage of our students that engage in research. It was about 50%, 60%. We are now at 95%. Why do we do that? That is because we want them to be critical thinkers, and we want them to be lifelong learners. We want them to be able to ask the question that will improve that environment. So our students are engaging in what I call R for Now research, which is real research for real people with real challenges now.
That's something even a non-clinician can understand
Yeah.
and appreciate. I can get behind.
I think the other thing that's different about the school, it used to be a lot more different than it is now, as other schools and healthcare systems have embraced it, is a focus not only on disease and treatment of disease, but is a focus on prevention and wellness and lifestyle medicine. And at this school, that was from the very beginning and continues now, because it's just important, probably more important actually, to keep people well and healthy than it is to treat them after they have a critical illness. And so it's another aspect of the school that used to be unique, and I don't think is so unique now from what I'm seeing around the country.
Well, we're still the global leader in lifestyle medicine. We built out an open source website for our curriculum materials to be given away to other programs. We've had 400 registrants from all across the globe. And schools. We were just on a call with the CDC Foundation this morning about a conference to end hunger at the White House that will take place sometime in late September, and they are coming to us to ask us how we might be involved in that. We have faculty who have educated congressmen and women about the importance. There have been now legislation that's moving through about nutrition and ending hunger. That's also about ending food deserts and things of that sort. So our school is, I'm really proud to say, the leader in the U.S., I have no doubt, in relation to lifestyle medicine, which is good preventative medicine. And in a country that spends 95 cents on every dollar for taking care of disease, I love that we are a school that is trying to prevent disease before it starts.
Absolutely. I've heard Dr. Trilk say, who heads up our lifestyle medicine, our students have said, you know, Dr. Trilk teaches us we're on first patient. And so to take care of ourselves the way we are coaching, advising, guiding our patients to, and learning that really their lifestyle is their first medicine, and then being able to share that with their patients. You've heard us talk about lifestyle medicine, our EMT certification program for our first year students. I think another thing we are proud of, especially in the state of South Carolina, is our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. With our student population, we know as of now, our students, 23% of our students are underrepresented in medicine. And I know our school has a commitment to continue fostering an environment of diversity, equity, inclusion. Would you talk a little bit about that, maybe some of the efforts that have led into building out a school that looks like our state?
So that foundation was already here from Dr. Youkey, Dean Youkey, who had resourced that, really made it a priority. We are an extremely diverse school to be in the Southeast, for sure. I get calls from colleagues that have 5% underrepresented across their 4 years. The founders also knew that we would need to give a lot of scholarships to be able to get students into our school, and we are doing that. So what you see here is a culmination of good planning, commitment, and our partnership with Prisma Health, and in our community, and calling our students. Our Levi S. Kirkland Society physicians actually call our applicants, tell them why they should come here, sometimes 2 or 3 conversations. We really appreciate that. The Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation of South Carolina, generous scholarship, and also now a decade-long program to bring students, South Carolinians, into our school, keep them in South Carolina for residency, and then have them serve South Carolinians. So that's really what our goal is. I really would love to keep all of my students here, our 430 students, and we're growing. We're hoping to grow the number of med students as well in the state so that we can have more physicians. But right now, I think our goal when I walked in day one was that we should look like South Carolina. It's important for patients to see physicians and healthcare providers that look like them.
Absolutely.
They report better quality care, they report better instruction, better compliance, and they're tending to come back for that really needed follow-up care.
Thank you. Dr. Youkey, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so probably 2 things. One is I think it's important always to remember why. I mean, Marjorie's right. We, from the beginning, really tried to set up a path toward a diverse student body and diverse faculty and so forth. But the reason is that we know, with data actually, that if you can diversify the learning environment the students are in, it actually markedly improves their education. They learn from each other, and if you're learning from your frat brothers, you're not going to have a very diverse learning environment, right? And so the more diverse you can make that clinical learning environment, the better the education is going to be for the students. When they become physicians then, they'll learn very quickly that no 2 patients are the same. They all come from different backgrounds. They may or may not be different colors, but they're not the same patient. And so if they've learned in their learning environment that everyone is different, and that they need to learn about other people in order to be able to help them in terms of prevention and wellness as care, they're going to be much better doctors for it. And that was the why. And then the one thing that Marjorie didn't mention that I think is critically important, and I know she does as well, and she'll pick up on this, is we started, I don't remember when, you would remember, we started something called the MedX Academy.
Yes, in 2010.
Okay. Let's see, the school opened in 2012. The MedX Academy was in 2010, so there you go. And the MedX Academy effort was led by primarily Dr. Brenda Thames, and it was a way to try to reach out into different education levels of students, originally in the upstate, and I don't know what the numbers are like now, but I think the students come from beyond South Carolina at this point, and identify high potential students from all backgrounds, and certainly from diverse backgrounds, that we would recruit from high school. actually, in college, and then encourage them to come to our medical school. And to me, one of the neatest things about the MedX Academy, besides the fact that it's successful, is, unless they've changed it, it's mostly taught by the medical students, which is a terrific way to recruit future medical students.
Yes.
So,
I realize I'm biased, but watching our Rising M2 students teach those MedX Academy students, it's watching those students who may or may not go on to medical school, but that intentional kind of mentoring back, setting that up, which you mentioned earlier, our faculty, they're training their peers, you know? So you look at that, our students, we want them to be excellent physicians because they're gonna be practicing alongside our physicians. That's intentional, and that's incredible to think about. You mentioned earlier Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina Foundation. In our 10 years, we have had some incredible partners, some incredible community members, some incredible donors who have helped shape our school and our students. Can we talk a little bit about what that means to our school, having that kind of support?
Well, I think that, of course, I came in again to a community that wanted their own medical school and had talked about it and first investigated having their own medical school in 1965. So that was persistence and patience and perseverance on the part of the community, the health system, to have our school stood up. A lot of generosity went into getting those scholarships loaded, being able to recruit students that really were pioneers, right, Jerry, coming in with hard hats to go to their first classes. And so scholarships, so I tell people that people or organizations will give resources to either change lives or save lives. But when you give a scholarship to a medical student, you're changing a life, and it's going to impact every life that physician impacts and saves in perpetuity. You have literally lifted them up out of a mountain of debt that they would otherwise have, so that they're free to choose family medicine as a profession, instead of having to go for maybe a surgical specialty that pays more because they're going to owe so much money. As you know, I love engaging people with resources around helping our students. I think there's a lot of pride in this medical school in this community, and it is shown by the generosity that really comes almost every week to us. People saying, how can we help? Talk to me about what you need. It really touches my heart.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Emeritus President Pastides educated me a lot about philanthropy. I was quite naive about it when I became dean. One of the things that I've learned is that there's not a lot of people around able to name a medical school, like the Geffen School at UCLA, because the going rate across the country for naming a medical school is about $100 million. So Harris Pastides used to say, this is the best bargain in the country. You can name this school for $50 million. And so we're still looking for that $50 million donor, but we haven't found them yet. But the community has been very generous and very helpful in regards to supporting scholarship for all students. And I think, I don't know what the data is right now, but I think Marjorie has a fairly low debt burden for students that graduate right now compared to much of the rest of the country.
Yes, we're about 30,000 or more lower than the average, and part of that is scholarships. Prisma Health gives us Prisma scholarships. They're Prisma scholars, and without that partnership, we would have a marked decrease in our scholarship giving. So part of the partnership of all the positives we've talked about, I do want to give Prisma a shout out, GHS before them, for saying we are going to give this much to scholarships every year, because our medical school right now is operationally independent of the health system, and it was exactly as the founders planned it. But that scholarship commitment that keeps coming to us every year, and therefore to our students, that's invaluable to us. So that the community generosity, the belief in, if you if you cannot, I want to give a scholarship. My husband and I are talking about it to the school. And we're going to do something. We're going to go ahead and start because, as you tell us, we can start anytime.
That's right.
But I cannot wait to meet my scholar. And I know Dr. Youkey has an endowed scholarship. Sharon and Jerry do. And so what does that feel like?
Well, we just met our third scholar 2 weeks ago, I guess. And it's a very fulfilling way to use your money, quite frankly, because you support a student, we do anyway, through the 4 years of medical school. And when you think of the number of lives that student will impact over the course of their career, it's a really good investment. And let me just say, so that Marjorie's correct, the community's been very generous, but we shouldn't get complacent because an increasing number of schools around the country are now free. And I could name 6 of them, I won't, but I could, where through the generosity of donors, usually a large donor like Langone, for example, the schools are able to offer the students school with no tuition from the student themselves. And so although the community's been very generous, the students have benefited from it a lot. Our debt ratios are relatively low compared to much of the rest of the country. More and more competition from schools that charge nothing to the student to go to school.
We are not resting on our laurels.
No, ma'am.
As when I came in 2019, I was told, well, this isn't Texas. Like, you're not going to be able to raise a lot of money here. I thought, really? I have found the community to be so generous.
Yes.
But my sort of big goal is to get the medical school named and to get tuition covered. And I believe, I mean, has anyone read the story of Greenville, South Carolina? Growing the best downtown in America, planning for 20, 25 years, Mayor Knox White, Unity Park. Just drive around here. We have vision, and we have leaders that lead through that vision to reality, and it doesn't happen overnight. So it's not going to happen it may not happen in a year. I mean, Greenville built out in 25 years since they first started really the planning, I think, 25, 30 years. When I read about the sort of get it done attitude of Greenville, I was like, this medical school is perfectly founded in a city. We have that same sort of energy and vibe in our medical school. It's get it done. And so I want free medical school. I want to name that medical school. I want someone to want to put their name on this amazing medical school. When you meet our students, I mean, best part of my day is seeing students and them telling me how much our school has impacted them and changed their life. It's a lot.
That energy, that kind of excitement, that engagement with the community is a great segue, thank you very much, into our 10th anniversary. We just capped our first decade and we are launching our next. Tell us what it means to you to celebrate that marker and then to look ahead. Obviously, we're looking ahead at being able to name School of Medicine Greenville, engaging with donors who would understand that impact and that gift, not just for our generations of physicians, but for the thousands and thousands of patients that would be affected by their physician. So I'll back it up one more time. What does that milestone mean for you? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Youkey.
For me, it's easy. It means we got the school open. We stabilized it enough that it survived. It recruited great students. And I retired in the fall of 2019, just before the pandemic came, and recruited someone that was able to take the school and keep it open and improve it despite the pandemic to get us to our 10th year anniversary. And so the future should be wide open.
Well, I appreciate that. I believe that celebrating the past 10 years and really looking at, I get to see from reading the history, looking at the financials from 12 years ago, the agreement, I get to see the intentionality that was put into this agreement, this partnership with the health system. I get to see the names of community leaders that came to the table and said, yes, we want a medical school, here's why, we're going to help support it. I look at the next 10 years and say, my first question to many community leaders now is, if we're sitting here in 10 years, what would you like to be talking about that you would be proud of? So I'm going to actually give that back to my friend and colleague, Dr. Youkey, and say, Jerry, if we're here, when we're here in 10 years, what would be that next kind of vision?
So I think in my own mind's eye, you've already mentioned a number of things that I would hope we would have. One is we'll still be here. Number two is we'll have an increasing contribution of our graduates to the physicians across the state of South Carolina, predicated likely on an increased number of residency programs across the state. We'll still be turning out physicians who are great practicing doctors as they go forward. And then instead of University of South Carolina School of Medicine Greenville, it'll be somebody University of South Carolina School of Medicine.
That's right.
Yeah.
And my goal over the next years that I'm blessed to be here is to really grow out population health, health disparity research to find answers for South Carolinians and help Prisma to meet its purpose and take good care of the 2/3 of South Carolina where we have a footprint. So that's really my goal, in addition to continuing to listen to our students and really hear them and let them tell us what they need to learn better. What support do they need? We take students, we have one of the most holistic admissions processes in the country. We take students that come from rural South Carolina, lower socioeconomic means, challenges, and we call it distance travel, and that doesn't mean miles.
Right.
It reminds me of myself growing up back in Appalachia, youngest of 8, coal mining family, told I could never be a doctor. I never want a student in South Carolina or anywhere really that wants to come to medical school to ever be told no. Yeah. We want to help them. We want to build a pathway for them. We want to bring them to the campus, let them see themselves, mentoring from our med students, students that look like them, maybe came from the same community. That is, I want to really grow up a robust group of physicians from our School of Medicine Greenville that give back to whatever community they're located in.
Right.
And we really do recruit people with the biggest heart and the biggest passion. I think, Jerry, you told me that our students give back pre-pandemic 28,000 hours, community hours a year. Wow. To that. And so I really want us to continue to live into that, find ways we can partner more, stronger, better, and also all of the things that Jerry said.
Plus. Here's to celebrating well our first decade and to kicking off our next. Thank you both again for joining me today. For our listeners, for our viewers, this has been Just What the Doctor Ordered, the podcast from the University of South Carolina School of Medicine Greenville. Please find all our updated news, exciting announcements, the day-to-day highlights of our medical school at greenvillemed.sc.edu. You can also find us on all your social media platforms, UofSC, SOMG. Again, thank you for joining us today, and we'll be back to you soon. Thank you.